Oh. When it was announced that the twit doctor will see you now, some of those in the waiting room were unclear as to whether it meant that a physician who himself was a twit was, or that a doctor who specialized in treating twits was now available. However, a chap who just come by to deliver some packages heard it and immediately recognized that there is no practical difference. You see, within a closed system, this is how the mind can make apparently valid criticism of non-aligned consciousness, and treatments and ills are interchangeable. One man finally thought, to ever get anywhere with this, I'm eventually going to have to leave town. Sometime later, a viewer wrote to ask, is this why a real mystic never has to leave home? Because he don't know where he lives to begin with? Contrary to popular belief, a snake rattles so that it knows where it is. Humans accomplish the same thing with their mind. That experience of unspeakable joy, so often mentioned by metaphysical writers, is no less than the electrical thrill of increased neural voltage. Olfacto sans humidifier. No one wants to actually know what's going on at the expense of what they already know. One man told his poetically inclined nephew, if you think nature's heartless, where do you get a good look at consciousness? When it came to be or not to be, one guy said he believed he'd just pass. A legend among one ancient theatrical group says that just before a man enters into the mystical state of enlightenment, he thinks, who's that with their hand in the hole in my back? Trees envy ventriloquist dummies for their ability to speak. What's your excuse? Civilization, the collective life of man, becomes increasingly complex to compensate for the individual not having to do so. The sign by the swimming pool read, men aren't living life, life is living life and taking men along for the ride. And now, about the news. One man said he'd pay more attention to the news if they'd ever report anything new. No one can entertain a sentence without end, nor the mystical without a structure. One day, while hanging out with his reflection, one guy said to it, the older you get, the worse your eyesight wants to become. And it replied, then we'll go see an optometrist. And he said, no, you don't get it. Somewhere sits a man who ponders, if consciousness is electrochemical, then increased consciousness is being more electrochemicalized. Now time for another distinction. The ordinary live their mental life out in public. It's a long way to Tipperary. You shouldn't stand so close to the edge. It's World War I humor. The simpler the people, the more do they expect to hear the mystical explained in terms of routine bodily functions. Or, put more simply, there are more followers of God's Viridicism than there are for those of philosophy. Now time for another way to test. You can always get the wimpy to act wimpy. Today's science quiz. What kind of preposterous cells believe they can ever perceive their host organism? Today's science answer. More conscious ones, you non-objective ninny. Be sure and stay tuned for our later art quiz of the day, which requires even less intelligence. One man was his own best friend, but even with that, says he, things still ain't looking or going so good. And just as the viewer was prepared to say that he almost got that one, a voice rang out, ready on the right, ready on the left, ready to fire down the middle of the range. And whammo, off went the neural ignition, right on time, right on target. If I thought World War I humor was obscure, I guess just anything having to do with the military, with a crowd of people, all expatriates of some sort from Canada. I guess I was expecting a lot. But thankfully, one of the random laws of the city jungle, those who don't know what's going on don't want anyone else to know either. One man said, I may be dumb and I may be ugly, but at least I'm both. The recyclable neural reality of routine urban existence. It's definitely undifficult to discourage the ordinary. They have so much to be discouraged about. And muttered one more hip young lad, yet another reason to blow this berg. Barkeep, hit us again over here with distinctions plain and clear. Consciousness is not open to debate, only thought. If love is one creature searching for its other sexual half, then mysticism is the mind seeking its own completion. When the meanest wolf first heard about the notion of God, he thinks, they're talking about me, at least allegorically, and then has to find someone to explain to him what allegorical means. Another way to determine how little you understand is if you still wonder if others understand more than you do. Note, not to be confused with fanaticism, which, by the way, should you do so, is simply additional proof of your parochial perception. Further proof how dumb you are. Okay, just for fun, I'll give you another distinction. A fanatic thinks that he alone is correct in his beliefs, while the more conscious knows that no one is. Save yourself the worry. All great art is mystical, regardless of the artist's intention. The recipe. Take all you know, turn it upside down, shake it, bake it, eat it, forget it, and go on to something new. A viewer writes, sometimes I don't understand what you're talking about less than others. Is this a type of progress, yours, etc.? Now an excerpt from the Secret Person's Secret Handbook. Anything you really know, nobody taught you. Hormones have no regrets, but try telling that to their captor's verbal memory. Definitive identifications from the body politic. Priest, those proclaiming that things will get worse. Kings, those in charge of making things worse. Philosophers, those attempting to make sense of the above. And finally, mystics, about whom I have nothing relative to say at this time. Thank you, and don't forget the judicious use of linseed oil on those rough areas around the elbows and medulla oblongata. You see, the difference between a scientist and a mystic is that the scientist believes that he wants to discover the secret of life, while a mystic knows that he does. The weak want to be reassured, while the strong want to eradicate any such desire. After an apparently appropriate length of time had elapsed, a viewer wrote, may I assume the possibility that this was meant at a level higher than the merely literal and physical? The simple of mind always want to look beyond the obvious in hopes that by doing so it might go away. Dream on, good viewer, dream on. The speaker in the park thusly addressed the noonday audience. If life itself was not smarter than man, then those dunderheads running things would have ruined us by now. And a hear, hear rippled through part of the crowd. Helpful hint time once again. No one is truly dumb until they take what they know and don't know seriously. Just think, thought a non-standard kind of guy, if everybody knew what was going on, then what I know wouldn't be anything special. Now some medical news. One man grated on his own nerves something terrible. Technical medical talk, something terrible. Why there is no conclusive checkmate. If you don't know the origins of the board, you can't quit playing the game. If man did not believe his life was more than hormones, it would not be so. More facts that are unprovable, and even if they were, would be of no one's concern. The life of the more conscious is like a fable without a moral. The inanimate envy the animate. Thus the mind's attitude toward expanded consciousness, which is always more vital and alive. Those who've had bitter experience have had only routine experience, and hardly worthy of man at that. Now back to our kitchen for yet another scientific analysis of a certain all-too-human foodstuff. The bitterness in your life is determined by the limits of your perception. Theatrics time. Mommy, is this why mystics always mix up their meals by a window? Yes, son, at least at those times when they can't seem to be one. Wow, Mommy, I believe one of those loaded cream puffs I eat is about ready to go off. Well, that's great, son. That's really nice. Now, finally, this. Mythology, the etiquette of its proper consumption. To understand a myth fully, you must first slay its hero. Or at least send him out of town permanently. Here's another fine example that you got me in. See, I had a request to work in Laurel and Hardy, and nobody believed I could do it. Another fine example of the electrochemical operations of the mind, how everything seems to be either one way or another way, and why anything that's not one way or the other way is extremely difficult to sell. Contrary to popular belief, a snake rattles so that it knows where it is. The unsaid preface to this, the unsaid assumption, if I may assume such, although in some parts of the country, assuming an assumption is somewhere between a misdemeanor and a felony too. But the assumption being that before that you understand that it is contemporary, is collective, it is assumed wisdom and belief, zoologically and just otherwise, but even zoologically, that a snake rattles, those which can, those who can't, some of them they bring along Xavier Kugak records to play. Snakes rattle to warn those creatures whom the snake cannot devour, but it's to warn something larger like a man or a wild boar, a That's got nothing to do with literary critics either. But a snake rattles to let others know where it is. Others that it wants to know. You know, if it's something that's going to eat, it makes no noise. But if it's that it rattles by, try to get serious for a moment. Well, all right. Jesus. Back to, I just thought it would be a good example because here is nice high school, entry-level college zoology, but it's still considered to be just an obvious, observable, undebatable phenomenon of the natural world. That snakes who have rattles, or which have rattles, for those of you that think less of our non-cortical friends and want them referred to in less personalized, I said get serious. Snakes rattle. Snakes rattle to establish, to let someone else, such as a human, since this human's made up this explanation, that a snake rattles to warn you, or to establish where it is, not to warn you that it's going to strike, because a snake really doesn't want to screw around with anything bigger than itself. But it rattles to let you know where it is, to stay away. That is just accepted reality. That's the wisdom of the collective experts. And even when you hear it, you don't have to be a zoologist. You hear it and you think, well, yeah, that's it. Because, especially if they tell you that they've observed that a snake does not rattle. If it's coming up on a frog for which it wishes to join in dinner, so to speak, to have for dinner, a snake does not rattle. A snake can control when it rattles. It rattles by conventional wisdom when it wants to let others know where it is. So we're starting off with a nice, just everyday, it's not even mystical sounding thus far. This says, it's printed right here, contrary to popular belief, a snake rattles so that it knows where it is. It just seemed like a good place to start as any, to show how ridiculous this sort of thing can be. Why would a snake, see, these people are already kind of smirking. I can see it out there like, boy, is that silly. A snake rattling so that it knows where it is. Do not fall into that time-honored trap of smirking too soon. A snake rattles to let it, so that it knows where it is. Then the next paragraph, consisting of one sentence, says, humans accomplish the same thing with their mind. Back to using the snake. Assuming everyone followed the conventional thinking, the belief that snakes rattle to let some other creature know where they are so that they will get out of the way. Leave them alone. This news item, written by, I won't say exactly who, but it says, snakes, contrary to popular belief, rattle to let themselves know where they are. Which, speaking again for conventional thinking people, you would say, well, is somewhere this side or probably past ridiculous. It's just silly. Serve no purpose. To such a person, I would say, then, what do you make of the second part that says humans accomplish the same thing with their mind? What is it that your mental operations, what purpose do they normally serve? We're talking about your normal daydreaming, uncontrolled. If it's not down to very ephemeral, specific items, which are normally the passing of direct information. Other than that, such as somebody comes up and says, by the way, we're supposed to shoot a man named Fred Q. Swartz. Is that your name? And you go, suddenly, your consciousness is just brought to a very precise head, and you go, no, it's not. You've got the wrong fella. Other than times like that, you understand. Or somebody says, hey, I got a 17-year-old sister, and I got to leave her somewhere overnight. Would you like to look after her? Or I've got this truckload of Jack Daniels, and I can't find anywhere to leave it. Other than specific information that seems to miraculously hold one's attention for a second. This seems to be of some personal use. Other than that is what I want you to understand. The rest of the time, of what use is the human mind? We can look at it philosophically, or you could be a big boy and girl and screw the philosophical. Ask yourself, 99% of the day, 99% of my life thus far, what does my mind do? Laughingly referred to sometimes as consciousness, but we try to be a little more specific around here. Of what use, what purpose does your mind serve normally? I submit to you, fellow amateur zoologists, it serves the same purpose as the rattle on a snake, properly understood. It serves to let you know where you are. Now you could say, if we were waxing philosophically, if not our skis, and say, well, it is to let others know. If you're going to carry it that far, then our mind going on is to let others know where we are. Yeah, but that's easy. That's too simple. I could have conjured up an overnight immediate school of philosophy or psychology or even a mystical tradition based upon the fact that one's mind acts as a rattle on a snake to let everyone know where you are. We don't have time for that. You can get that in comic books if you know how to translate it. It's to let you know where you are. But back to the snake, back and forth as fast as we can go. Still speaking, it's ridiculous, right? To say, well, a snake rattles so that he knows where he is. You think, well, Jesus, he knows where he is. Everybody knows where they are. Well, especially anything animate. I won't get as ridiculous as I could. Yeah, I probably will, but anything animate. It knows where it is, right? Knows in the widest possible sense. Nobody's ever heard of a snake or a possum that somebody walks up to a possum and says, "Here, kitty, kitty," and the possum goes, "Meow." Or you look right in the dog's eye and says, "Did you do that in the floor?" And the dog look around like, he's not even there. Of course, some dogs try that. But the point is, it being ridiculous to say that a sentient creature, well, that covers it. A sentient creature knows, in some sense, that it's there. If it did not, it would not be sentient. It would not move. It would not react to the environment. So it knows where it is, because you can go up to a worm and punch it with a stick, and the worm will try to get away. It knows where it is. It knows that that's it. Now, it can't talk. We're dealing with a hormonal, just a bio survival level, but it knows where it is. Then you would say, if you were ordinary, you'd say, all right, I can go for that. But a man's mind, what does that have to do with establishing where he is? You don't find any correlation, given that time to reflect deeply. You don't find any correlation between what would appear to be a pretty mechanical, limited in scope, limited in vocabulary, to wit, the rattle of a snake. You don't see any correlation between that and the workings of your mind 99% of the time. You don't see any correlation between that and the matter of attention. Attention would be, in a sense, since I've gone down this road, would be the rattle of a snake's tail ripped and frozen in midair. It would be controlled. But what is it ordinarily? What is the operations of the mind ordinarily going on? What is the envelope of ordinary attention? It is almost, although you would think, if you're following along this line, that the snake is being internally driven, that his reactions to the environment that he is making his tail do like this. But that does not seem familiar with ordinary attention. What? Well, it could. Yeah, but sometimes you're not that way. Well, yeah, but yeah, he said 99% of the time. Yeah, but he could have been a figure of speech. Well, what if he'd said a lot of the time? Well, a lot of the time, how much of the time? But he didn't say specifically who. Well, he just said everybody. Yeah, but he could be talking about, had some kind of anomalistic thinkers in mind. Nobody thought of him. Rattle. Now, it would not do if we had people who were outside the mainstream of the parade, that is, people who are not ordinary middle class, sane men and women. But if we had them and asked them, in other words, somebody just by ordinary definition who is not psychotic, just somebody who is ordinarily sane by the collective definition at their time and place, if you ask them, have you ever thought about, you get some sense of what goes on in your mind that just goes on and on? And most ordinary people, if you ask them the right way and made it non-judgmental, and they went, yeah, sometimes I felt my mind drive me crazy, or sometimes I get all upset about something, or somebody insult me, and I'll keep replaying over and over about them saying, hey, what time does the blimp go up? Or, hold on to those clothes, they'll come back in style. Some insult, and I keep replaying it. And my mind goes on and on and on and on. And I said, well, that kind of noise, do you see any similarity between that and a rattlesnake going, rrr? Yeah, except what I think about, at least a human, has got to be of some more significance. All right, should we spell, instead of saying rattle, 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 maybe I should make it rattle, 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 two different words. Rattle, plattle, but it's still... See, a snake doesn't have two lobes to his so-called brain, and so he has to do it with his tail. But man, being the superior creature that we are, plus you got to notice we've already got the brain power to make weapons. We do not physically have to warn every creature on this planet to stay out of our way. Most of them now have got enough sense. And supposedly also zoologists have found out, I don't want to go into it, but that humans, even to carnivorous large beasts like lions and tigers, humans seem to have an unsavory, an unattractive aroma. The point being that humans, if you notice, do not have to protect themselves from any other large creatures other than their family. And husband or wife, people down the street. The rattle, rattle is a protection against what? The shaking of the head instead of the tail. Even if we were the snake, even if that was a valid description of why snakes rattle, is to let others know where they are, and so that you don't come step on me, stay away. What are humans up to? What is normal operations of the brain? You don't see any similarity, not only in the noise. Like I said, instead of rattle, rattle, you don't understand what I was saying. Instead of it being two, I guess that's what a comic book would say if they were going to put in a description, of the snake going. I should be a little more, instead of rattle, rattle, let's make it rattle. So it sounds like two different things, but the two different things being quite. That look familiar to anybody? Now, does it help? That there is the exercise, there is the realization in some form of polarized energy. In the snake's case, it is rattle, plattle, rattle, plattle, rattle, plattle. And in humans, it is shall I point to any of you, even if you're not mothers and fathers biologically, you've surely been around enough to see kids lay there and go. Even it's reported there's some people past the age of puberty that will even lay around in bed and go, like trying to put themselves to sleep. And those of you who want to get really good, how about dancing with partners? But back to serious matters. It would appear to be on the surface silly to say that a snake rattles for any other reason than's already been established. That seems to quite adequately cover it. But then to go past that and to say, well, they rattle to establish, to let them, the snake rattles to let itself know where it is just beyond, it's hardly worth discussing. It's so silly. You have operating at the other end of the body, instead of the tail, you have operating with humans, the mind rattling, and it's to let you know where you are. The frightening thing, in case you don't know it, some of you have had a taste of it, but what has frightened many people, all the way from those fooling around with so-called psychedelic drugs who've tried it once or twice and went, oh no, all the way to that to people who believe that they were involved with a more specific, worthwhile endeavor of some mystical tradition of sitting or whatever it was, fasting or studying somebody's work and sitting around and making noises or lighting candles, whatever it is, and they get close to, as the metaphysical poets put it, if I pull that one out, of this unspeakable joy they experience, that's something just extraordinary, and about the best they can say verbally is, hey, it's nonverbal. About the best they can describe it is saying, hey, I can't describe it. But it's a great term in English, the unspeakable joy which I was describing for in electrochemical terms, which sounds a little bit better than a snake's rattle, just the other end. But the metaphysical poets, them trying to describe this experience, there have been many people who believe that they were indeed involved with the struggle to experience it, and all they got to do is get a little close, and it, as they used to say in some Buddhist schools, scares the piss out of them. And in a sense it should. That is part of the fail-safe mechanism of life keeping itself balanced, of life keeping the parade on schedule in the middle of the street without too many people going awry internally, because it is frightening. And it's frightening, which is simply a word, but it's frightening. That is the word most commonly used, or would be used if people described it, because what they feel is though, I am about to go somewhere totally unknown. I'm about to leave town, and I don't know what's outside the city limits. It is then that many people, if they have the ability and the weather's just right, they back off. That's a nice way of putting it, like they had the ability to do so. But they either backed off, something happened, because if you do hesitate at that last minute, life is a little more protective of itself neurally than it is physically. Because physically, all you got to do is get off balance on the edge of a cliff or a board, diving board, and you're done for. I mean, you're going over. You can't change your mind past a certain point. Neurally, comparably speaking, you almost can. You can almost go too far and go, well, no. Life seems to have a longer reach at the back of your shirt, neurally, than it does physically. It'll let you, no. Which is why it is not as morbific to go crazy as it is to have prostate cancer. I hate to give you the blues, but you can get psychotic. As a bingo parlor owner or an attorney without a suit, you can go crazy and still live, probably 70 or 80 years. Whereas with many kinds of cancers and other various physical ills, you're prone to go visit Elvis a lot sooner. You can be crazy and still live out a nice, full, chronological life is the point. Life will let that go. Whereas if you die physically, you're sort of, I think they call it dead. But whereas up here you can be almost unfunctioning and still live. The extreme example, of course, being forms of brain traumas from accidents, and you live there in a vegetative state for another 30 or 40 years and not necessarily on life support systems. In many cases, people just lay there and they're unconscious for the next 40 years. And they lay there in bed. Because sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between them and a French horn player, but little musician joke, but at least I didn't say a math English teacher. I mean a high school English teacher. There is a kind of non-charted, it's certainly not in any psychological textbooks or psychiatric textbooks, or neurological, and it is only at best in very vague and very vague allegories. I won't speak for those who originally wrote them, in the world of the mystical, of trying to describe the experience of getting past where the mind normally operates. Because in the everyday world, if someone's consciousness, that is physical, if the electrochemical activity of the mind goes into an area that's new, in you, which is not education. Learning the multiplication tables is not going into a new area of the mind. Once you get to the point that you know whatever is standard for where you are, nothing has happened to you neurally, intellectually. I'm not playing with words, I don't know what you ever thought about it. But if you're up to the point now of being just as smart as anybody else on this planet, I mean, you've accomplished nothing. Well, it's not my business, but I'm telling you, if you think, well, now I've gotten somewhere, I have a PhD. If that's what you had to have, all right, now you got it. But it could be no more than, if we're going to speak in transcendental terms and at a higher level, you could be now in no objectively better state, better position than some guy who dropped out of the 5th grade. Education is not the expansion of one's consciousness, but at any rate, because it does not expand the activities of the brain. You're still dealing with a closed system. You're still dealing with a chessboard, and you're moving pieces around. And it's certainly, by everyone's opinion, by the collective wisdom around the board, that, hey, you're getting somewhere. And it could have been an interesting hobby, and you could, if you're ordinary, believe that you are getting somewhere, that, well, now I got my master's. Now I'm getting somewhere. That's fine. But that has nothing to do with the expansion of brain activity. The expansion of brain activity is absolutely unnatural. It is not capable of direct induction from without, to wit, a college professor, a guru. I know it gets iffy. But hey, it's either iffy or maybe it's the gout. There's Parkinson's. Maybe it's a gesture of a guy from Brooklyn named Parkinson. How was that? I was trying to include everybody in here. At least I didn't pull out the guy named Titweiler. The expansion inside of one's own brain is an electrochemical activity. That is what the mystical experience is what any increase in one's consciousness is, no matter what it's called. And there is no preparation for it externally. There is no normal way in which to tell a man that is an ordinary man. You cannot tell an ordinary man that, do you believe that it might be capable for a human, or it might be possible for a human to reach some extraordinary state of understanding? And most ordinary people would go, well, yeah, if I had time, I would have gone on to graduate school. You go, no. Because that's at first what they think, well, yeah, I try to read a lot, or I wish I had more time to study. You go, no, not collecting new information, which is, we're not attacking that, you'd say. We're not, but it's internally, the brain itself, the juices, the electrochemical juices, where you are conscious in your brain, goes over into a new area. It goes from whatever city you were born in, to use my own terms. Wherever the city is that you are now living, as you go outside that. Even if a person heard the theory and went, well, yeah, I've heard about stuff like that. There is no way to, quote, directly teach it, to directly go, well, go over there. Now that is exactly, of course, what all religion at a cruder level and the so-called attempts at mystical systems and traditions attempt to do more specifically, is to say, go over there. See, that is not a focusing of one's attention, remember. That is a refocus. As long as you continue to move the pieces around on the board, you don't understand the origins of the board and the game, you can't ever quit the game. You can't get off the board. You can't go anywhere else. You'll keep moving the pieces around. And quite likely, if you are in some way relatively sane, you do have the distinct impression that you're getting somewhere. You're supposed to. To feel otherwise would be psychotic. To be otherwise would be, at least intellectually, suicidal. You'd be doing that which you would be convinced on your own is wasting your time. So there's the feeling that, yes, I'm getting somewhere. The getting of somewhere has to be off the board, to use my own analogy. Remember, I was giving you the whole idea of human consciousness could be seen as a board game. More specifically, the whole idea, the whole concept that I want to learn something deep. I want to learn something that is indeed transcendental. Easily put, the secret of life. Scientists believe it. Theologians believe it. Would-be mystics believe that, yes, that is the point of life from varying views. But they still believe that I am going to change around the information. They call it expand the information. We're getting in new data. We have better technology. We have more equipment to observe the universe. The religious people, well, they take their best shot since they don't have any theology. Well, we're getting better candles. We have better communal wine. They're still moving around information. They're still moving around in the same area in which they live in the city. They are still living amongst the collective. And if you do not know any more than everyone else does, you don't know anything. And you can be a leading expert in your field, but you don't know anything. Consciousness does not change. there is that fear that you're going to step over. I'm not attempting to make more out of this than there is, because if that sort of thing scares you off, then it's tough shit. You're a wimp to start with. But enough of you have had the experience, surely, and I'm sure people that might hear this at random have played around with drugs in the past, and very likely, in fact, thought they went too far. That, oh, it was great fun there for the first hour, or the first 10 minutes, or once it hit. And I thought, woo, where has this stuff been all my life? Then within about 15 minutes, I became extremely, I don't know how to tell you, I became so frightened. I had to go try to get somebody to give me an anecdote, somebody to talk me down, as I used to call it, get me out of this. And it was not that whatever was going on, forget the story, I'm not even going to bring up the story, you've all heard them or had your own, that you believed that suddenly the wallpaper was talking to you. You know, all that was not it. If it was truly a psychedelic drug, if it was truly something working on the mind and other things can happen, beyond drugs, I was giving you an easy way to start to look at it and try to recall it. The fear is you don't know what's happening. Now, that could be described, well, I don't know where my mind was going. That's getting close. I couldn't tell. At first it seemed good, and I thought, this is it. It was almost, as the mystics would say, an unspeakable joy. I thought, oh, and I began to have the impression, wait a minute, life is beginning to talk to me. But then it's like the mind. The brain itself went, whoa. And then it said things, no, it's not the mind talking to you. It's that green carpet on the floor. And you and your mind both understood, this will never do. No, no, no. Life, to say the obvious, life doesn't pay me for this, but life do know how to look after itself. Now back, believe it or not, to the wonderful world of reptiles. So you think it's ridiculous that a snake, for me to say that a snake, contrary to popular belief, rattles to let itself know where it is. People continue to think the same things over and over, having no choice. It has to do with the time and the place, which has no relevance to you personally. It is simply wherever the collective is at the time, where the parade of life is. Wherever that is, everyone rattles. The humans walking next to you are continually rattling. And at first you may think, well, they're trying to impress me, which has been an old attack, even pseudo-mystically, that everyone is trying to blow their own horn. People are too vain. People are always so pushy, wanting you to be impressed by them. Yeah. So are wolves. What the hell? Since when do you think you're better than wolves? Well, don't answer. But there you walk among life, and everyone else is rattling. And it's not only to get your attention, which is part of it. It's to rattle, and you look around, and whoever's rattling, they're holding up. And it's not just the plain rattle. You could hear it. But it was the sound of onion skin. That is, he's rattling now. My PhD, my doctoral degree, woo. Or he's rattling, it turns out it's money. I got a raise, I just sold my business, or I just sold a new piece of property, $50,000 overnight. That kind of thing. Or look, how great I am. It's that thing in the parade of trying to show other people, to rattle, hey, kind of be frightened, be impressed. That's the easy one. The other one I'm pointing out to you is the human mind itself stays at a certain frequency. To go back and use the parallel of the sound of a rattle, it stays at the same frequency, and it's the people in the parade to help establish where they are. It is like a continual attempt. For those of you that didn't like it, screw you. I'll do it again. For those of you that didn't like it, as I point out that you almost, this was being sarcastic, same as me saying screw you. Well, I certainly didn't mean that. Theatrical sarcasm. Dramatic sardonicism. I point out that you almost have to stare, you almost have to not try and hold your attention at all to keep from being a mystic. You remember that one? It's like instead of a handful of people, instead of .something% of the world's population at any time actually trying to achieve personally, for no reason that they can explain, but sane mystics, sane would-be mystics, trying to experience that unspeakable joy. 0.1% of the population trying, devoting their life. You know that there are people that are spending much more effort than you do trying to do that. So, We got that small little amount. Well, let's say 1%, so I don't have to keep saying 0.1% because I don't understand what that kind of shit means anyway. Decimals. What do they think they're fooling? Yeah, that's education for you. As soon as they understood they didn't know what they were doing, they come up with this thing about fractions and decimals and. Okay. 1% of the population trying their best to become more conscious, to wake up, to experience that enlightenment that is unspeakable in its expansion, its joy. And then we've got 99% of the world's population, no interest in it. Okay? What if that's backwards, in a sense, in an operational sense? That you have to go ahead and just try your best to blind yourself and go, yeah, I want to get rich. Yeah, I want everybody to be impressed and frightened by me. You have to stay in the 99% and live a fairly, 65 years like going crazy, like wasting your time doing stuff like this. And everybody thinking, God, are you weird? And seeing your aunt once every 10 years at family reunions, and she says, are you still reading all those spooky books and dressing up like a ninja or whatever it is you're doing? You have to go, oh no. What if those 99% are having to put forth effort, that you must put forth that kind of effort that seems, from the 1% view, to be a Philistine waste of time, that they're actually having to put forth that effort to keep from being like the other 1%, that they understand, that they understand the myth I gave you, the original myth, that everyone comes past the line, and right there, right after creation, you got just a split second, you're coming down the assembly line between the other Ken and Barbies, and here it comes, and you stop for 1 second, like quality control. And instead of a paid hourly employee there on the assembly line, production line is life. And you got 1 split second, and you and life stare each other dead in the eye. What if almost everybody, fully understands right then what life's about? And life wants 99% of them to be like they are. And that 99% realize, wait a minute, I know what's expected, and so they look off. See, as opposed to the original, I'm sure the way you took the story, the way I originally told it, like most everybody looks off. A few don't. Ha-ha! Our kind of people. But what if the 99%, they realize all this and they go, no, I ain't going to spend 70. It's bad enough I realize now I'm going out the door here and got to go out and live a life. And just this fast, and they understand what the 1% is going to be putting up with, and they go, no. And they look off. And that's when life approves, like, you did good. You wimp. It's known in mystical circles as being intellectually pussy-whipped. For those of you who've really been around. Maybe we should put out a metaphysical dictionary. Then again, perhaps not. That's one reason that Sears and Roebuck cut out their catalog. It was no longer needed in more rural areas of the world. Now that Georgia Pacific and other companies provide the similar service. What if the 99%, what if it is indeed an effort, a conscious, specific effort that must be made to keep from understanding more than you do? That other people, without knowing it, understand, if I knew more than I did, I'd simply be more upset. I mean, I'm upset enough as it is now. Say ordinary people. And if you don't believe it, look at them. I'm talking about the ordinary. They're upset. They're the ones that take life seriously. They're upset. They're the drunks. They're everybody. They run the world. The world runs over them. They're everybody. Everywhere you look, there's the ordinary. And they're upset. What if they understand, wait a minute, yeah, I'm upset, but at least I ain't as upset as you, because if I hadn't looked away, if I hadn't got all involved with this other parts of what's going on here in life, all this other stuff, I'd be really upset. Now back to the wonderful world of what? Comedy? Reptiles. Boy, what a short memory. Cold-blooded humor, which is the world of reptiles. Objective humor, by the way, does no good. You cannot take it out in the morning and lay it on a hot rock. It will not warm up. Not unless it's wimp humor. How about, what if the rattle with ordinary people is, It helps keep them distracted. It helps keeps them hypnotized. It is the snake, contrary to popular belief, trying to tell others where it is trying to tell itself where it is. Why do you talk about yourself? Even if you get to the point of which I guess is some improvement, that you can cut down on the overt flapping of the tongue and talking about yourself. What does your mind normally do when left to its own devices? Rattle, 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 rattle. And what's it rattling about? Oh, I don't know. Should we guess? I mean, what is this? 10,001 questions? What does the ordinary mind rattle on about? Wow. Of course, it gets mild instinct for 30 seconds. An ordinary person could hear that and go, I know what you're insinuating, but that's not true. Because a lot of times I think about other people. A lot of the time. Do I have to fill in the rest for you? Oh, well, all you got a mind. Why do I have to fill all this in? Yeah, I'd give them credit. Yeah, you're right. A lot of times you do think about other people. They just didn't finish the sentence. I think about wondering what they think about me. I think about, I wonder what they're saying about me now. Yeah, right. Wonder if they fear me enough. Wonder if they respect me enough. Yeah. It's rattle, rattle, rattle. What if you had to? Getting a little more specific. If consciousness, as one guy was surmising back early this evening when it was safer to do so, he was surmising that if consciousness is simply, he didn't say simply, but I'm going to go ahead and say it for him, is simply electrochemical, then would not expanded consciousness simply be being more electrochemicalized? Yes. It would be expanding the brain activity into areas where it is not now active. That is, by anybody's account, it sounds unmystical to those who wanted to dress up and put funny spots on their forehead and wear turbans, I know. But that is all forms of enlightenment, mysticism, etc. Transcendental experience, the unspeakable joy, is an absolute thrill, which is frightening, as I was covering for you. This unspeakable joy of the great, just ordinary, recognized metaphysical poets, religious, mystics, they've continued, at least in English, translate into this unspeakable joy. And some of them just say that it just changed their whole life. And they just, and it's true. But then after it's over, the ordinary mind, because it's proof again that they're back where they started, or they've moved back very close to town. They moved back to very close to where they used to live, or they would not now be publicly talking about it. But if they do, all they can say is it is just, it's unspeakable joy, and then they have to attribute it to something external. The easy one always being good old God. Throw it on God, yeah, some way some force that I don't recognize, that doesn't visit us, doesn't live in our neighborhood, something just absolutely, by the real definition, transcendental, gave this to me. It connected with me, yeah. It is literally the thrill of an increased voltage. It is being, as the guy surmised, an increase in the electrochemicalization of the brain. That's what it is. What if it takes an effort, and this is strictly theatrical to do it again, but takes an effort for that not to happen? And one of the ways you don't let that happen is to continually rattle, 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 rattle. Put it to you another way, those of you that's falling into this. How about all these people that spend a large part of their life? There are people right now, people are fairly sane. It's not just an overt attack on the people. But there are people right now involved with 10 and 12 hours a day, constant, 7 days a week, in a monastery somewhere, in a Zen school, a Sufi school, attempting to focus their attention, whatever it's described as. I've already described it for you in that term. It is they're attempting to grab their own attention, the way it appears, and to focus it themselves. That is the step right before the unspeakable joy of that experience. They're attempting to do that, but what if, rather than look at it that way, that they're over there spending 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, for the last 15 years, and happy to do it, and feel like I'm getting, anyway, they're happy. They feel like they're accomplishing. What if, from another view, instead of them making that effort, that it takes the effort of ordinary people to almost do nothing to keep it from happening? That you've got to continually go rattle, 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 rattle. That you've got to continually take the input, the stimuli that's out there, to take it seriously, to continue, if you can't think of anything to do, is you just react to it. You keep talking to life. You keep criticizing life. You keep laughing. You keep scoffing. You keep cursing everything else. You keep kicking out at the parade. What if them attempting, by my own description, that they're attempting through continual physical effort at least to try and focus the attention, that's what they're after? What if you look at it another way, and ordinary people, the activities of the mind, the rattle that's up at the neural end, the head end instead of the tail end, to distinguish you from a snake, that the rattle, the daydreams, the clatter of the mind is to keep it from focusing. It's not just a rhetorical question. One other piece. Those of you that are getting good, pass that. That wasn't the end of the sentence. Then ask yourself, it's not just rhetorical, ask yourself right now, some of you are close enough to be able to feel it, if you could actually stop the mind, if you could stop the chatter going on here, forget what comes next. If you could stop it, if you could get out of town, as this another guy surmised tonight, he said, if I'm ever going to get anywhere with this, I'm finally going to have to leave town. For those of you that didn't get it, you have to leave town finally. What if leaving town, what if you could stop it right now? What would you think about? Now, so there's those involved with an apparently externally directed effort, such as those sitting, let's say, in a Zen school, any kind of school, and they're attempting to go through whatever procedure, some ritual of sitting or meditating, and I'm telling you what they're trying to do is to stop the rattle, and for them, apparently, personally, individually, to grab their attention and to hold it. That's the step to give you, anyway, that's the second, right before that kind of experience. That is the second, according to that one legend, that theatrical group that had a legend, that right before the great experience, everyone suddenly thinks just momentarily, whose hand is that up the hole in my back? I assume you get it. Or if you want to look at it, Muppets, whose hand is that up my skirt? Because that's what you get just at that final second, is you realize the rattle that's been going on, you realize where the noise has been coming from, you realize the sound of the parade. John Philip Sousa is in everybody. No. Not Elvis, John Philip Sousa is everywhere. Everybody is making the noise and rattling. What if the focus of attention, of being able to hold your own, consider if right now we could stop, if you could stop the rattle in your own head, then what? I know it sounds rhetorical, but in ordinary people, as I've described, through drugs and other methods, and some of you have been close before, and without knowing how to explain it, it was frightening because you were confronted operationally with the question, though it was not put to you verbally, or you didn't put it to yourself because you were very close to being nonverbal and yet conscious, was, wait a minute, if I go any further, what the hell's going to happen to me? What if I leave town and can't come back? What if I leave town and I don't know who I am? Of course, that's the whole point of leaving town. That is to move in your area of the brain as you go over there and you're nobody. And many bodies, that is ordinary people, sane people, can even hear that and they go, well, wait a minute, let's don't be too hasty. Which is one of the built-in safeguards of mystical tradition. They're never too hasty. I mean, that's why they're warned, well, yes, you can come join us here, but hell, the head monk's been sitting and meditating for 40 years and he's still not conscious. So, that's what you're faced with. And yet, when it gets close, it's like, wait a minute, this is going too fast. But that's the thrill, is you have increased the voltage. You have moved the electrochemical activity into areas the areas do not spatially or temporally exist right here and now. That's why they're unspeakable. But as long as you keep rattling, to end on a positive reptilian note, for all you people who love the outdoors, keep rattling, and at least you're all right. Just keep on rattling. Plus you can think, wait a minute, maybe that won't work. See, there you go. Do you mean that literally? Well, and then you can think, well, man, that has got to be an allegory. Now that sounds familiar? Well, I hate to ruin everybody's life. But think about all the wonderful, scintillating conversation, all the great thoughts, the debates, the philosophical, religious, political, economic, social debates in the world all the great pros and cons, being able to read the great books of the Western world and the great books of the Southwestern world. And what if you suddenly realize that it's rattle, 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 rattle? And it's no longer frightening, it's